So how do you protect your devices? Well, as we said, you want to use password and other authentication. That's biometric. For programs, we recommend using two-factor authentication. There's a great program, Google Authenticator, that works with a lot of programs now. That's become a standard. Also, two-factor is fine, a text sent to a device or an email sent to a separate device. So, ways that you can authenticate two different ways that it is you. And that's really helpful and makes and keeps those instances of people misusing IDs and passwords, tries to keep that to a minimum. Install enable encryption on everything. Activate remote wipe and disables. That's very important. As I stated earlier, I've lost, unfortunately, 2 iPhones. The ability to track them and lock them down and then subsequently erase them has been, I found, invaluable. I'm sure everybody can commiserate with me, but with the amount of information that we store in these devices now, it's imperative that you're able to track them, wipe them if you need to, but at a minimum, be able to lock them down. Disable or do not install file sharing apps. This is only file sharing apps that you as a employer are allowing on your devices. If you're going to use something like Box, and that's a system that is everybody that needs to, that's the program you're going to use, and you've said, okay, we're going to use Sukasa, and you install that on the on everything, then you need to basically you need to say, okay, this is what we're going to install, and that's part of the document and how you do things. So install and enable firewalls. You have software firewalls, and you have it's basically software firewalls are included in all devices and all operating systems now when it comes to desktop machines. Make sure those are enabled. Those should be set to whitelist, which means that it blocks all incoming traffic. You want to make sure those are enabled at all times. And then for your practice, you probably want to look at getting a hardware firewall. Again, those should be set to deny access. So if people are trying to access your devices or get in through your network, that will stop a lot of that traffic. It also can help if you do have an issue with basically, say you do get infected, that will help sometimes with keeping that that virus from getting out of your network too. So can save your clients and whatnot, and stop those kinds of actions happening. And always install and enable those security updates. Those are not there just for fun. I know a lot of people I've talked to don't do those security updates or overlook them. There are a lot of them that come in. If there's a security update that's there, it's there for a reason. And it's there to protect you because it's a vulnerability that's been found. And I'll tell you a little story. I've been following some of these hackers that go around, and the reasons that these, they come up with these hacks and they publish them is because they find that a lot of these larger companies aren't responsive when somebody says, hey, there's a hole. The only time they're responsible or seem to be responsive is when they find a hack and then they publish it, and then all of a sudden Apple goes, whoa, we need to fix that, we need to patch this hole. And that's the reason why we have these security updates that come out. That means that that is actually an imminent problem that could happen. Somebody could access your network. So it's important as those are discovered that you do have a policy and you have a standard for putting those in place. Now realize that that could take your system down for a bit, so if you can do those over an evening or later in the day when traffic may not be so there might not have so much traffic in your practice. You want to try to you can schedule those around those times, but you really want to make sure that if a security update comes through, that within about a week that you then push those updates. So tips for protecting your devices, you really research those mobile apps before you download. These days, for the most part, the Apple Store and the Google Play Store are really good, and the Windows App Store are really good about trying to scan those, but even sometimes they get through there. So, make sure you're being really careful about what you're downloading. Is it something that you really need? I know we all like to play games on our phones, but keep on top of that and make sure that, hey, do I really need to have these items on? If it is a device that's maintained by the practice, be that a mobile device, a laptop, you may want to just disable that altogether. You may want to say, hey, we're only going to allow certain programs on these devices, and you're well within your rights to do that. And make sure that that you basically assess those before that happens. Maintain the physical control of devices. That's pretty self-explanatory. Adequate security when using a public Wi-Fi. That's where a VPN comes in really handy, because you're looking at a situation where that creates a encrypted portal from your device to the EHR or to another system. So making sure that using that, because if you're in a situation where you're at the library or at the local coffee shop using a network, anytime you access a website that doesn't have HTTPS on it, which is the Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure on it, that information can be vulnerable and can be read in transit by anybody with minimal hacking skills. So that means any passwords you're sending or anything you're doing could conceivably be intercepted. So it's important that you have those, because that secure protocol, what that does is puts that secure socket layer over it and encrypts that information in transit. A VPN will take care of that also. So just be really careful about what you're accessing and what you're doing when you're in public. Deleting all stored info before discarding or reusing. As Dan talked about with that copier incident, the company did not erase that drive when they turned it back in for lease. Making sure that you overwrite those drives, and don't just say erase. You want to do what's called a secure erase. A secure erase actually puts ones and zeros over the device, because if you just do an erase, essentially what it does is it takes the headers off, and those files are still exist on your drive. And any data recovery person can go in and actually grab those files. So secure erase actually overwrites those as ones and zeros, so it's basically wipes those clean and erases any of that data. So make sure you're deleting those and deleting those and doing that properly. Turning off Bluetooth visibility. That's really helpful. That's something that generally we don't think about that very much, because we've got it's very helpful to have Bluetooth, but there have been a lot of vulnerabilities that we've seen with Bluetooth. But making sure if you do have it active, that it requires a password to access. But for general purposes, if your devices are going to have protected health information, it's a good idea to limit that access to through Bluetooth and not leave it as active passively. Do not share your mobile devices. Don't share them with friends. Don't share them with family. These are very personal devices and carry very personal information, not only for you but for your practice. So it's important to keep those in your possession. And make sure those devices are registered with your organization. It's important to have MAC addresses as well as IP addresses for those devices, serial numbers, so that you know when something's lost, that you can track it as best you can, and also it helps it at times when you're filing for insurance claims. That's very, very helpful.